The first gunshot rang out in the darkness, shattering the still prairie night like glass breaking on a stone floor. Dahlia Hart, a slender woman in a torn travel dress, ran barefoot across the cold, damp earth, her breathing ragged and her heart pounding against her ribs. The second shot came closer, kicking up dirt near her feet as she fled toward the silhouette of a barn that loomed ahead in the moonlight. Dahlia had arrived in Redding, Montana Territory, just 3 days earlier, a mail-order bride with dreams of escape from her troubled past in Boston. Now those dreams lay in ruins, much like the small valise she'd abandoned when she fled from the man who'd paid for her passage west, a man whose true nature revealed itself only after the wedding ceremony. She reached the weathered barn, her fingers frantically searching for a latch or handle in the darkness. Finding it, she yanked the door open just enough to slip inside, then pushed it closed behind her. The interior was pitch black and smelled of hay, leather, and animals. Dahlia pressed her back against the wooden wall, willing her breathing to quiet as she listened for footsteps outside. "Come out, wife," a slurred voice called from the distance. "You can't hide from me forever. I paid good money for you, and what's mine is mine." Dahlia's hand went to her throat, feeling the bruises that had already formed there. She'd been in Redding for less than a week, and already she was running for her life from the man she'd legally bound herself to. Harold Wilkins had seemed decent in his letters, respectable, established, lonely. The reality was a drunk with cruel eyes and crueler hands who'd shown his true colors the moment the preacher left them alone. Footsteps crunched on the gravel outside, coming closer. Dahlia pushed away from the wall and moved deeper into the barn, feeling her way in the darkness. She needed to hide, to disappear until she could figure out what to do next. Her foot caught on something hard, a bucket, perhaps, and she stumbled, barely catching herself before she fell. The barn door creaked open, letting in a sliver of moonlight that cut across the dirt floor like a silver blade. "I know you're in here," Wilkins called, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Don't make me angrier than I already am, girl." Dahlia moved silently behind a stack of hay bales, crouching low and making herself as small as possible. She held her breath as Wilkins' heavy footsteps moved further into the barn. A match flared to life, illuminating his face in its glow, the drooping mustache, the bloodshot eyes, the hateful sneer. "Found yourself a hiding place, have you?" he muttered, lighting a lantern he'd brought with him. The flame cast long shadows across the barn's interior. "Well, I've got all night to look." Dahlia pressed deeper into her hiding spot, praying he wouldn't see her. She had nowhere else to run. The sound of horses outside drew Wilkins' attention. He turned toward the open door, raising the lantern higher. "This is private property," he called out, his voice changing from menacing to cautious. "Who's there?" "Adam Kincaid," came a deep, steady voice from outside. "I'm looking for my strays. Thought they might have wandered onto your land." Wilkins lowered the lantern slightly. "Ain't seen no strays. Now get off my property." Heavy boot steps approached the barn door, and a tall silhouette appeared in the entrance. The man was broad-shouldered and lean, his face shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "Strange time to be in your barn with a lantern, Wilkins. Everything all right?" "Mind your own business, Kincaid," Wilkins spat. "I'm looking for something that belongs to me." The newcomer stepped further into the barn, and now Dahlia could see him more clearly. He was younger than she'd expected from his voice, perhaps 30, with a weathered face that spoke of years under the sun. A gun belt hung low on his hips, though his hand wasn't near the holster. "Something, or someone?" Kincaid asked quietly, his eyes scanning the barn. Wilkins' face contorted with rage. "My wife ran off. She's hiding somewhere, and when you find her, what?" Kincaid's voice had dropped, becoming dangerous. "She needs to learn her place, Wilkins said, his fingers tightening around the lantern handle. "Not your concern, Kincaid." For a moment neither man spoke. Dahlia held her breath, feeling as though the slightest movement would give her away. "I heard you got yourself a mail-order bride," Kincaid said finally. "Heard the ceremony was just a few days ago. What of it?" "Also heard gunshots on my way here," Kincaid continued, his tone conversational but his eyes hard. "That how you treat a new bride, Wilkins? Shoot at her when she runs from you." Wilkins took a step forward, his face mottled with anger. "Get out, now." Kincaid didn't move. "I think I'll have a look around first, make sure everything's as it should be." "This is my land, and that's my conscience," Kincaid interrupted, nodding toward the barn's interior. "Let's make a deal. I'll help you look for your wife. If she's here willingly, I'll ride away and forget what I heard tonight. If not—" He let the sentence hang unfinished in the air between them. Wilkins' hand moved toward his hip, where Dahlia knew he kept a small pistol tucked into his belt. Before he could reach it, Kincaid's gun was in his hand, aimed steadily at Wilkins' chest. "I wouldn't," Kincaid said quietly. The two men stared at each other for what seemed an eternity to Dahlia. Finally, Wilkins lowered his hand. "Take a look, then," he said, his voice tight with suppressed fury. "She ain't here anyway." Kincaid kept his gun trained on Wilkins as he moved deeper into the barn. His eyes swept methodically across the shadowy interior, pausing briefly on the stack of hay bales where Dahlia was hidden. She couldn't tell if he'd spotted her or not, but her heart thundered in her chest. "Tell me something, Wilkins," Kincaid said as he moved. "What kind of man shoots at a woman?" "His wife, no less." "She's my property," Wilkins snarled. "I paid for her passage from Boston, paid the preacher. Fed her, clothed her. She belongs to me." Something dark passed over Kincaid's face. "Women aren't property. The law says different. We're married legal and proper." Kincaid was closer now, close enough that Dahlia could see the cold fury in his eyes. "The law also says you can't murder your wife, which seems to be the direction you were headed." "I wasn't going to kill her," Wilkins protested, though the lie was evident in his voice. "Just scare her a bit, teach her a lesson." Kincaid stopped directly in front of the hay bales. Without turning his head, he said in a clear voice, "Madam, if you're here, you have a choice to make. You can stay with this man, or you can leave with me right now. I give you my word no harm will come to you." Wilkins' face contorted with rage. "You have no right—" "Quiet," Kincaid snapped. "Let the lady decide." Dahlia's mind raced. She had no reason to trust this stranger, but she knew with absolute certainty that if she remained with Wilkins, she wouldn't survive the night. Taking a deep breath, she rose slowly from behind the hay bales. Wilkins lunged toward her, but Kincaid was faster, stepping between them with his gun still aimed steadily at the other man's chest. "Don't," Kincaid warned. Dahlia stepped out fully, her legs shaking so badly she feared she might collapse. In the lantern light, both men could now see the torn sleeve of her dress, the bruises forming on her neck and face. "She fell," Wilkins said quickly. "Clumsy woman." Kincaid didn't respond, keeping his eyes on Wilkins as he addressed Dahlia. "Madam, what's your name?" "Dahlia," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Dahlia Hart." "Wilkins, Dahlia," Kincaid said, his voice gentle. "Do you want to stay with this man?" She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "No," she managed. "Please help me." Wilkins lunged again, reaching for the gun tucked in his belt. Kincaid moved with surprising speed for such a tall man, striking Wilkins across the temple with the butt of his revolver. The smaller man crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Kincaid holstered his weapon and turned to Dahlia. "He'll be out for a while, but not long enough. We need to go now." She nodded, still trembling. "I have nothing with me." My things, we'll worry about that later, Kincaid said, shrugging out of his coat and draping it over her shoulders. It was warm from his body and smelled of tobacco and horses. Can you ride? A little, she admitted. It's been years. You'll ride with me then. He guided her toward the barn door, keeping himself between her and Wilkins' prone form. My horse is just outside. The night air was cold against Dahlia's tear-streaked face as they emerged from the barn. A large bay gelding stood patiently by the fence, reins loosely looped over a post. Kincaid helped her mount, then swung up behind her in one fluid motion. His arms came around her to take the reins, creating a secure circle that felt like protection rather than confinement. "Where are we going?" she asked as the horse began to move, its stride eating up the dark ground beneath them. "My ranch," Kincaid answered, his voice close to her ear. "It's about 5 miles east of here. We'll be safe there." Dahlia knew she should be frightened. She was riding into the night with a man she'd just met, leaving behind the only person in Redding who knew her name. Yet all she felt was relief so profound it made her dizzy. She leaned back slightly, allowing the steady rhythm of the horse and the solid presence of the man behind her to lull her into a state of cautious calm. "Thank you," she whispered, the words inadequate for what he'd done. His only response was to nudge the horse into a canter, carrying them both away from Wilkins' property and into the vast Montana night. The ride to Kincaid's ranch seemed both endless and too brief to Dahlia. Her body, already sore from Wilkins' abuse, protested against the unfamiliar motion of the horse. Yet she welcomed the pain, for it meant she was alive and free at least for now. As they crested a small rise, a cluster of buildings came into view, silhouetted against the star-filled sky. A main house, larger than Dahlia had expected, sat nestled among cottonwood trees. Nearby stood a substantial barn, a bunkhouse, and what appeared to be a cookhouse. Several corrals spread out from the buildings, and even in the darkness, Dahlia could see the shadowy forms of horses moving within them. "This is your ranch?" she asked, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. Kincaid nodded, his chin brushing against her hair. "The Flying K. Been building it up for the past 8 years. He guided the horse toward the main house, its windows dark in the pre-dawn hours. As they drew closer, a dog began to bark, the sound sharp in the night stillness. A moment later, the front door opened and an older woman appeared holding a rifle and a lantern. "Adam," the woman called. "That you?" "It's me, Essie," Kincaid called back, drawing the horse to a halt in front of the house. "We have a guest." The woman Essie raised her lantern higher, her weathered face coming into sharp relief. She was in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun and piercing eyes that missed nothing as they traveled from Kincaid to Dahlia. "I can see that," she said dryly. "Brought home more than strays this time, I see." Kincaid dismounted in one fluid motion, then reached up to help Dahlia down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet touched the ground, and she would have fallen if not for Kincaid's steady hands on her waist. "This is Mrs. Dahlia Hart," Kincaid said, deliberately omitting her married name. "She needs a safe place to stay." Essie's sharp eyes took in Dahlia's torn dress, the bruises on her face, and the way she trembled despite Kincaid's coat around her shoulders. Her expression softened almost imperceptibly. "I'll put on coffee," she said simply, turning to go back inside. Kincaid kept his hand at Dahlia's elbow as he guided her up the porch steps and through the front door. The interior of the house was warm and surprisingly elegant, a far cry from Wilkins' sparse, dirty cabin. Polished wood floors stretched beneath their feet, and comfortable-looking furniture filled the front room. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, embers still glowing within it. Essie had disappeared, presumably to the kitchen to make the promised coffee. Kincaid led Dahlia to a chair near the fire and gently urged her to sit. "Essie is my housekeeper," he explained as he added a log to the fire. "Has been since I bought this place. She's stern but kind, and she can be trusted completely." Dahlia nodded, watching the flames grow as they consumed the fresh log. "He'll come looking for me," she said softly. "Wilkins, he paid for me. In his mind, I belong to him." Kincaid straightened, his face hardening. "You don't belong to anyone, Mrs. Hart." "Dahlia," she corrected him. "Please call me Dahlia," he nodded. "Dahlia, then, and I'm Adam." She managed a small smile. "Adam, thank you for what you did tonight." Before he could respond, Essie returned with a tray bearing 3 cups of coffee and a plate of biscuits. She set it down on a small table near Dahlia's chair. "Eat," she instructed, handing Dahlia a cup of coffee sweetened with plenty of sugar. "You look like you need it." Dahlia accepted the cup gratefully, wrapping her cold fingers around its warmth. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until the smell of the biscuits reached her. She hadn't eaten since early that morning, before Wilkins had started drinking and turned violent. "Thank you," she said, taking a small sip of the coffee. It was strong and sweet, exactly what she needed. Essie handed the second cup to Adam, then took her own and sat in a chair opposite Dahlia. "Now," she said, her tone businesslike, "perhaps someone would like to explain what's happening." Adam looked at Dahlia, clearly leaving it to her to decide how much to share. She took a deep breath and another sip of coffee before beginning. "I came to Reading as a mail-order bride," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. "I answered an advertisement placed by Harold Wilkins. He described himself as a respectable rancher seeking a wife. We corresponded for several months before he sent money for my passage from Boston." She paused, taking a small bite of a biscuit. It was still warm and delicious. "I arrived 3 days ago," she continued. "We were married that same afternoon by a traveling preacher." Wilkins seemed different in person than he had in his letters, less refined. But I told myself it was just the journey, that things would improve once we settled into a routine. Her hand trembled slightly, causing the coffee to slosh in the cup. "They didn't improve. Tonight he had been drinking heavily. He became angry when supper wasn't to his liking. He struck me more than once. When I tried to defend myself, he became enraged. I ran. He followed with his gun." Essie's face had grown increasingly grim as Dahlia spoke. She looked at Adam. "Wilkins, the small place east of town, by the creek." Adam nodded. "That's the one. Never did like him," Essie muttered. "Always had mean eyes." She turned back to Dahlia. "Where did he find you, child? Behind the barn?" "Yes," Dahlia admitted. "I was hiding there when Mr. Kincaid Adam arrived." "He was searching for her with a lantern," Adam added. "Had already fired 2 shots at her, said she was his property." Essie made a disgusted noise. Some men shouldn't be allowed to breathe good air. She rose from her chair, setting her empty cup on the tray. "You'll need a room, child. And some clean clothes. Come with me." Dahlia stood, wobbling slightly on her tired legs. "I don't want to impose nonsense," Essie interrupted. "No one's imposing. You're a guest." She turned to Adam. "What are you planning to do about Wilkins?" Adam's face was grim. "He'll be looking for her as soon as he wakes up. I'll ride into town at first light, speak with Sheriff Tanner." Essie nodded approvingly. "Good. He's a fair man." She gestured for Dahlia to follow her. "Come along, child. You need rest." Dahlia glanced at Adam, who gave her a reassuring nod. "Go on. You'll be safe here. I promise." "Thank you," she said again, knowing the words were inadequate but having nothing else to offer. Essie led her upstairs to a clean, simply furnished bedroom. A large bed with a patchwork quilt dominated the space, and a washstand with a pitcher and basin stood in one corner. "This will be your room for as long as you need it," Essie said, lighting a lamp on the bedside table. "The bathroom is down the hall. We have indoor plumbing, thank the Lord. I'll bring you a nightgown and some clothes for tomorrow." When the older woman had gone, Dahlia sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the events of the night. An hour ago, she'd been certain she was going to die at the hands of the man she'd married. Now she was in a stranger's home, being treated with more kindness than she'd experienced in longer than she could remember. Essie returned with a cotton nightgown, a hairbrush, and a bundle of clothing. "These might be a bit large," she said, laying them on the bed. "They belonged to Adam's sister when she visited last summer, but they'll do until we can get your things from Wilkins' place." "Adam has a sister?" Dahlia asked, finding herself curious about the man who had rescued her. "Elizabeth," Essie confirmed. "Lives in Denver with her husband and children. Visits once a year or so." She paused, studying Dahlia's face. "You should wash up before you sleep. It will help with the bruising." Dahlia's hand went to her cheek, wincing as her fingers touched tender skin. "Is it very bad?" "Nothing that won't heal," Essie said firmly. "Now get some rest. Morning will be here soon enough, and there'll be decisions to make then." After Essie left, Dahlia washed as best she could with the water from the pitcher, changed into the borrowed nightgown, and climbed into the bed. The sheets were clean and smelled faintly of lavender. Despite the turmoil in her mind and the aches in her body, exhaustion claimed her almost immediately, pulling her down into a deep, dreamless sleep. She woke to sunlight streaming through curtains she didn't recognize, in a room she'd never seen before. For a moment, confusion gripped her, then memory returned in a rush. Wilkins, the barn, Adam Kincaid on his bay gelding. Dahlia sat up slowly, noting how every muscle in her body protested the movement. A glance at the small clock on the bedside table told her it was past 9 in the morning, far later than she usually slept. She slipped from the bed and went to the window, pulling back the curtain to look outside. The flying K looked even more impressive in daylight than it had in the darkness. The main house sat on a gentle rise, overlooking a valley where horses grazed in fenced pastures. Beyond them, cattle dotted the landscape, black against the green of early summer grass. In the distance, mountains rose blue and hazy against the sky. A soft knock at the door drew her attention. "Yes." "It's Essie," came the older woman's voice. "I've brought breakfast." "Please come in," Dahlia called, stepping away from the window. Essie entered carrying a tray laden with food, eggs, bacon, biscuits, and a pot of coffee. She set it on a small table near the window. "Thought you might prefer to eat up here this morning," she explained, pouring a cup of coffee. "Give those bruises a chance to fade a bit before you face the day." Dahlia's hand went to her face again. "Is there a mirror?" Essie nodded toward a dresser across the room. "There. But don't fret over what you see. Bruises heal." Taking a deep breath, Dahlia crossed to the dresser and looked at her reflection. The face that stared back at her was almost unrecognizable. Her left eye was swollen, a dark purple bruise spreading across her cheekbone. Finger marks encircled her throat and a small cut split her lower lip. "Oh," she breathed, tears filling her eyes. "None of that now," Essie said firmly, coming to stand beside her. "Sit and eat. Food heals the body and the body heals the spirit." Dahlia allowed herself to be guided to the chair, where she obediently took a sip of coffee. "Is Adam Mr. Kincaid here?" "He rode into town at first light," Essie said, setting a plate of food in front of her. "Went to speak with Sheriff Tanner about your situation." Fear curled in Dahlia's stomach. "What will happen? Wilkins and I are legally married." The law also says a man can't beat his wife half to death," Essie interrupted, "or shoot at her when she runs. Sheriff Tanner is a fair man, he'll listen." Dahlia picked at the eggs on her plate. "What if he doesn't? What if he makes me go back?" Essie's weathered face softened. Adam won't let that happen. He barely knows me, Dahlia protested. Why would he risk himself for a stranger? The older woman was quiet for a moment, as though deciding how much to say. Adam has his reasons, she said finally. He's a good man. If he says he'll help you, he will. Dahlia wanted to press for more information, but something in Essie's expression warned against it. Instead, she ate her breakfast, surprised by how hungry she was once she started. The clothes I left should fit well enough, Essie said when Dahlia had finished. Come downstairs when you're dressed. I'll be in the kitchen. Left alone, Dahlia moved to examine the clothes Essie had brought. There was a simple blue cotton dress, slightly too large but serviceable, along with undergarments and a pair of worn but comfortable-looking shoes. She dressed quickly, ran the brush through her tangled hair, and made her way downstairs. The main floor of the house was even more impressive in daylight. The front room opened into a spacious dining room, and beyond that, Dahlia could see a large, well-appointed kitchen where Essie was kneading dough on a flour-dusted table. Feeling better? Essie asked without looking up. Yes, thank you, Dahlia replied, hovering uncertainly in the doorway. Is there anything I can do to help? Essie glanced up, her eyes appraising. You know how to make bread? I do, Dahlia said. My mother taught me before she passed. The older woman nodded, as if confirming something to herself. Wash your hands, then. You can shape these rolls while I start on the stew for supper. Grateful for something to do, Dahlia rolled up her sleeves and washed her hands at the sink. The familiar work of shaping the dough into rolls was soothing, giving her hands something to do while her mind tried to make sense of her new circumstances. How long have you worked for Mr. Kincaid? She asked after a while, hoping conversation might distract her from worrying about what was happening in town. Going on 8 years now, Essie replied, chopping carrots with practiced efficiency. Came with the place, you might say. My husband managed the ranch for the previous owner. When he died and Adam bought the property, I stayed on to keep house. It's a beautiful place, Dahlia observed. Much larger than I expected. Essie's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. Flying K is one of the biggest spreads in this part of Montana. Adam built it up from almost nothing when he came here. Where did he come from? Dahlia asked, placing a perfectly shaped roll on a baking sheet. Colorado originally. Spent some time in the Army, then worked cattle drives through Texas before coming north. Essie paused, giving Dahlia a shrewd look. He doesn't talk much about his past, not for me to share what little I know. Dahlia nodded, understanding the gentle rebuke. Of course, I'm sorry for prying. Not prying to be curious about the man who saved your life, Essie said, her tone softening slightly. Just some stories aren't mine to tell. They worked in companionable silence for a while, Dahlia finishing the rolls while Essie prepared ingredients for the stew. The simple domesticity of the task was comforting, reminding Dahlia of happier times in her mother's kitchen back in Boston, before illness had claimed both her parents and left her alone in the world. The sound of hoofbeats outside drew both women's attention. Essie moved to the window, peering out. It's Adam, she confirmed. And he's not alone. Sheriff Tanner's with him. Dahlia's hand stilled, fear coursing through her. Do you think, no point guessing, Essie interrupted. We'll know soon enough. She wiped her hands on her apron. Come along. Dahlia followed Essie to the front of the house, her heart pounding in her chest. Through the window, she could see Adam dismounting from his horse, followed by a stocky man with a sheriff's badge pinned to his vest. They spoke briefly before turning toward the house. The front door opened and Adam stepped inside, removing his hat as he entered. His eyes immediately found Dahlia standing tensely beside Essie. Mrs. Hart, he said, his voice formal in the presence of the sheriff. This is Sheriff James Tanner. He'd like to speak with you about what happened last night. Sheriff Tanner was older than Adam by at least 20 years, with a gray-streaked beard and tired eyes that had seen too much of human cruelty. He nodded respectfully to Dahlia. "Madam," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "I understand you've had a difficult time." Dahlia swallowed hard, finding her voice. "Yes, sir." Adam gestured toward the sitting room. "Perhaps we could all sit down." Essie touched Dahlia's arm reassuringly before disappearing back to the kitchen, leaving her alone with the two men. Adam guided her to the same chair she'd sat in the night before, then took a seat nearby. Sheriff Tanner sat opposite her, his expression grave but not unkind. "Mr. Kincaid has told me his account of what happened last night," Tanner began, "but I'd like to hear it from you if you're up to it." Dahlia nodded, clasping her hands in her lap to keep them from trembling. Haltingly at first, then with growing steadiness, she told the sheriff everything: how she'd come to Redding as Wilkins' mail-order bride, the wedding, his increasing violence, and finally, the events of the previous night. Tanner listened without interruption, his weathered face revealing nothing. When she'd finished, he nodded slowly. "Thank you for sharing that, Mrs. Hart," he said. "It can't have been easy." "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The sheriff sighed, rubbing a hand over his beard. "Legally, it's complicated. You and Wilkins are married under the law, but what he did, the beatings, shooting at you, those are crimes, married or not." "Wilkins is claiming she ran off with valuables," Adam said, his voice tight with anger. "Says he was trying to stop a thief, not hurt his wife." Dahlia gasped. "That's not true. I took nothing but the clothes on my back." "I believe you," Tanner assured her. "Wilkins has a reputation in town. Not many would take his word over yours, especially given." He gestured vaguely toward her face. "What does that mean for Mrs. Hart?" Adam pressed. Tanner was quiet for a moment, considering. "For now, she can stay here if she wishes. I've told Wilkins to keep his distance while I sort things out." He looked directly at Dahlia. "There are legal remedies, madam. Divorce is possible, though complicated. Given the circumstances, a judge might be sympathetic." "Divorce," Dahlia repeated, the word feeling foreign on her tongue. In Boston, divorce was whispered about, a scandal that followed women for the rest of their lives. But here, in this vast territory where survival often trumped social conventions, perhaps it was different. "It's something to consider," Tanner said gently, "but not a decision you need to make today." He rose from his chair. "In the meantime, I'll keep Wilkins in line. If he gives you any trouble, you send word immediately." Adam stood as well, walking the sheriff to the door. Dahlia remained seated, her mind whirling with the implications of what Tanner had said. Divorce, freedom, a chance to start again. When Adam returned, he found her still sitting, lost in thought. "You're welcome to stay here as long as you need," he said, taking the seat the sheriff had vacated. "The ranch is remote enough that Wilkins won't bother you, and there's plenty of room." Dahlia looked up, studying his face. In the daylight, she could see him more clearly than she had the night before. He was handsome in a rugged way, with sun-bronzed skin and lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of squinting into the distance. His hair was dark brown, cut short but still showing a tendency to curl. But it was his eyes that held her attention, gray-blue like a winter sky, direct and honest. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, the question that had been burning in her mind since he'd found her behind the barn. "You don't know me." Something flickered in those gray-blue eyes, pain, perhaps, or memory. "I know what it's like to be powerless," he said quietly, "to be at someone else's mercy." She waited, sensing there was more he wasn't saying, but Adam simply rose from his chair. "Rest today," he said. "Tomorrow, if you're feeling up to it, we can ride into town to collect your things from Wilkins' place." Tanner will escort us to make sure there's no trouble." Dahlia nodded, relieved at the thought of retrieving her few possessions, especially the locket containing miniature portraits of her parents, the only thing she had left of them. "Thank you," she said, the words becoming a refrain between them. "For everything." Adam merely nodded, then headed outside to where his ranch hands were working. Dahlia watched him go, wondering at the man who had risked himself for a stranger and opened his home to her without question. There was more to Adam Kincaid than met the eye, and despite the uncertainty of her situation, she found herself curious to learn what lay beneath his quiet strength. The following days passed in a blur of new routines for Dahlia. With Sheriff Tanner's escort, she and Adam had retrieved her belongings from Wilkins' cabin, a tense but mercifully brief encounter during which her husband had glared sullenly, but made no move to stop them, not with the sheriff's hand resting pointedly on his gun belt. Now settled at the Flying K, Dahlia found herself gradually easing into the rhythm of ranch life. Essie welcomed her help in the kitchen and around the house, treating her neither as a guest nor a servant but something in between, a young woman in need of purpose, while she sorted out her future. Adam was often busy with the demands of the ranch, especially as summer approached and cattle needed moving to higher pastures. Yet he made time each evening to check on her, his quiet concern a balm to her battered spirits. They would sit on the porch after supper, watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and crimson, talking of small things, the weather, the animals, books they had read. It was during one such evening, nearly 2 weeks after her arrival, that Dahlia finally gathered the courage to ask about his past. "You said you know what it's like to be powerless," she reminded him softly. "What did you mean?" Adam was silent for so long that Dahlia thought he might not answer. His eyes were fixed on the distant mountains, seeing something beyond their jagged silhouettes. "I was 16 when the war broke out," he said finally. "Too young to enlist, but not too young to have opinions. My father was a Union man through and through, despite living in a border state. He made his views known, loudly and often." He paused, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. "One night a group of Confederate sympathizers came to our farm. They dragged my father outside, accused him of helping runaway slaves. His voice grew tight. They hung him from our own oak tree." Dahlia gasped, her hand going to her mouth. "Adam, I'm so sorry," he nodded, acknowledging her sympathy but not looking at her, as if the story was easier to tell to the darkening sky than to another person. "My mother and sister were sent to live with relatives," he continued. "I lied about my age and joined the Union Army the next day. Spent the next 2 years fighting until I took a bullet at Gettysburg and they discovered I was underage." "So young," Dahlia whispered, imagining the boy he'd been, fueled by grief and rage. "After the war I drifted west," Adam went on. "Worked cattle drives, learned to break horses, eventually saved enough to buy this place when the previous owner died." He finally turned to look at her, his eyes holding hers. "I built something here, something that's mine that can't be taken away." Dahlia understood then his fierce independence, his instinctive defense of those who couldn't defend themselves. He'd been shaped by that terrible night when everything had been stolen from him. "Thank you for telling me," she said simply. Adam nodded, then rose from his chair. "It's getting late. You should rest." But that night marked a shift in their relationship. Adam began to include Dahlia more in the workings of the ranch, teaching her to ride properly on a gentle mare named Willow, showing her the books where he kept the Flying K-Tekes accounts, introducing her to the ranch hands who managed the cattle and horses. The men treated her with a careful respect, tipping their hats when she appeared and watching their language in her presence. Dahlia learned their names and stories. Tom, the grizzled foreman who'd been with the ranch since Adam bought it. Young Pedro, barely 18 but already skilled with horses. Micah, a former slave who'd headed west after the war and found work with Adam, and half a dozen others who lived in the bunkhouse and did the hard, physical work of keeping the ranch running. As June bloomed across the Montana territory, Dahlia found herself healing not just the visible bruises, which faded from purple to yellow to nothing, but deeper wounds as well. The constant fear that had been her companion since her arrival in Redding began to recede, replaced by a cautious sense of security. The Flying K was becoming a home to her in ways that Wilkins' cabin never could have been, but the question of her future remained unresolved. Sheriff Tanner rode out one afternoon to inform her that Wilkins was still demanding her return, claiming his legal rights as her husband. The sheriff had held him off so far, but the situation couldn't continue indefinitely. "You need to decide what you want to do, Mrs. Hart," Tanner said gently, accepting a cup of coffee from Essie. They were seated in the front room, Adam standing near the window, his face unreadable. "What are my options, truly?" Dahlia asked. "You mentioned divorce, but I know little about how that would work." Tanner sighed, setting his cup down. "Divorce isn't common, especially in territories like Montana, but it is possible. You'd need to petition the territorial court on grounds of cruelty. Your injuries and the testimony of Mr. Kincaid about the night he found you would support your case." "How long would it take?" Adam asked from his position by the window. "Several months at least," Tanner admitted. "The circuit judge only comes through Redding quarterly, and Wilkins would have the right to contest it." Dahlia's hands trembled slightly at the thought of facing Wilkins in court, of having to recount the details of their brief, violent marriage to a room full of strangers. "There's another option," Tanner continued cautiously. "You could leave the territory. Go someplace where Wilkins couldn't find you easily." "Run away," Dahlia said flatly. "Start fresh," Tanner corrected. "Many do out here in the West." Adam moved from the window, his expression troubled. "What about annulment? The marriage was less than a week old when she fled." Tanner shook his head. "Harder to prove grounds for annulment, and—" He paused, looking uncomfortable. "If the marriage was consummated," Dahlia flushed, looking down at her hands. "It was," she said softly. Not willingly, but yes." A heavy silence fell over the room. Adam's hands clenched into fists at his sides, then deliberately relaxed. "I need time to think," Dahlia said finally, "to decide what's best." Tanner nodded, rising to his feet. "Of course, but don't wait too long, Mrs. Hart. Wilkins is growing impatient, and I can only hold him off for so much longer." After the sheriff had gone, Dahlia escaped to the garden behind the house, seeking solitude among the neat rows of vegetables and herbs that Essie tended with meticulous care. She knelt in the soft earth, pulling weeds with perhaps more force than necessary, trying to clear her mind enough to think. That was where Adam found her an hour later, her hands dirty and her face streaked with tears she hadn't realized she was shedding. "Dahlia," he said softly, crouching beside her, "you don't have to decide anything today." She looked up at him, suddenly angry not at him, but at the impossible situation she found herself in. "Don't I? Every day I stay here puts you at risk." "Wilkins could come with men with guns, let him try," Adam said, his voice hardening. "This is my land. I have every right to offer hospitality to whoever I choose." "But for how long?" Dahlia pressed. "I can't hide here forever. I can't," she broke off, a sob catching in her throat. Adam's hand covered hers, stilling her frantic weeding. "You're not hiding," he said firmly. "You're healing, and while you do, you're welcome here." She looked down at their hands, his large and calloused, hers smaller but beginning to show the marks of work as well. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you care what happens to me?" Adam was quiet for a moment, his eyes studying her face. "Because in the time you've been here, I've come to know you," he said finally. "You're strong, Dahlia, stronger than you realize. You deserve a chance at the life you want, not one forced on you by circumstances or other people's cruelty." His words warmed something inside her that had been cold for too long. "Thank you," she said, the familiar phrase carrying new weight. Adam helped her to her feet, his touch gentle but firm. "Come inside. Supper will be ready soon, and Essie will have both our hides if we're late." Dahlia smiled despite her turbulent emotions, allowing him to guide her back toward the house. As they walked, she found herself hyper-aware of his presence beside her, the solid strength of him, the clean scent of soap and leather that always seemed to surround him. It was a dangerous awareness, she knew. Adam was her protector, her benefactor, nothing more. To imagine otherwise would be foolish, especially while she remained legally bound to another man. Yet as they reached the back door of the house, she couldn't help but wonder what might have been if she'd answered Adam Kincaid's advertisement instead of Harold Wilkins. The following morning dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect summer day that seemed to stretch endlessly ahead. Dahlia woke early, her mind clearer than it had been in weeks. During the night, a plan had begun to form, not perfect, perhaps, but better than indecision. She dressed quickly in one of the simple cotton dresses she'd brought from Wilkins' cabin, then made her way downstairs. The house was quiet, Essie not yet up to begin breakfast preparations. Taking advantage of the solitude, Dahlia slipped outside onto the porch. The ranch was coming to life around her, horses nickering in their corrals, chickens clucking as they pecked at the ground near the cookhouse. From the bunkhouse, she could hear the low murmur of voices as the hands prepared for another day's work. And there was Adam, already mounted on his bay gelding, giving instructions to Tom as they prepared to ride out to check the cattle in the north pasture. He saw her on the porch and raised a hand in greeting, then said something to Tom before turning his horse toward the house. "You're up early," he said as he dismounted, looping the reins over the hitching post. "I wanted to speak with you," Dahlia replied, suddenly nervous now that the moment had arrived. "Before you left for the day." Adam nodded, climbing the porch steps to join her. "What is it?" Dahlia took a deep breath. "I've made a decision about what to do." His expression didn't change, but she noticed the slight tensing of his shoulders. "Go on." "I want a petition for divorce," she said, the words coming out in a rush. "Sheriff Tanner said it would take time, but I think it's the right path. I don't want to run away and start over somewhere else. I want to stay in Redding or near it, at least, and build a life here." The tension in Adam's shoulders eased slightly. "I think that's a wise decision. But you should know it won't be easy. Divorce proceedings can be unpleasant, personal." "I know," Dahlia acknowledged. "But running would feel like letting Wilkins win somehow, like admitting I did something wrong by leaving him." Adam's eyes warmed with approval. "You didn't do anything wrong. You survived. With your help," she added softly. A moment of silence stretched between them, filled with things neither was ready to say. "I'll ride into town today," Adam said finally. "Speak with Tanner about starting the process." In the meantime," Dahlia interrupted gently, "I'd like to earn my keep here more fully. Essie has been teaching me the household accounts. I have some education I could help with the ranch books as well." Adam studied her face, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You don't need to earn your keep, Dahlia, but if it would make you feel better, I'd welcome the help. The accounts are not my favorite part of running the ranch." Dahlia smiled, relief washing through her. "Thank you. I want to contribute, to be useful." "You already are," he said simply. Then, glancing at the sun rising higher in the sky, he added, "I should go. Tom and the others are waiting." Dahlia nodded, stepping back. "Of course." "I'll see you at supper." "At supper," he confirmed, then descended the porch steps and mounted his horse in one fluid motion. He tipped his hat to her before turning the gelding and riding toward where Tom waited. Dahlia watched him go, a strange mixture of emotions swirling inside her: hope, anxiety, and something deeper that she wasn't yet ready to name. True to his word, Adam rode into town that day, returning with news that Sheriff Tanner would help file the necessary papers for Dahlia's divorce petition. The process was set in motion, though as Tanner had warned, it would be months before the circuit judge returned to Reading to hear the case. In the meantime, life at the Flying K settled into a comfortable routine. Dahlia took over management of the household accounts from Essie, who was secretly relieved to be free of the task. She proved to have a head for numbers and organization, skills that soon extended to the ranch accounts as well. Adam, finding his paperwork miraculously ordered and up to date, began to consult her on business matters: the price of beef, the cost of new breeding stock, investments for the ranch's future. Summer deepened into August, bringing hot days and the occasional violent thunderstorm that swept across the plains with breathtaking fury. On one such evening, with rain lashing against the windows and lightning illuminating the sky in brilliant flashes, Dahlia sat at the desk in the study, a ledger open before her. Adam entered, shaking water from his hat. He'd been out checking on the horses, making sure they were secure in the barn before the worst of the storm hit. "Everything all right?" Dahlia asked, looking up from her work. "Fine," he assured her, hanging his wet coat on a peg near the door. "The animals are settled. It's the men I worry about. Bunkhouse roof has been leaking again." Dahlia smiled. "I'm sure they've endured worse." "No doubt." Adam moved to stand near the fire, warming his hands. "What are you working on so late?" "Feed calculations for winter," she explained. "Based on last year's records and the current herd size." Adam shook his head, a smile playing at his lips. "I don't know how I managed before you came." "Poorly, according to these ledgers," she teased, gesturing at the book spread across the desk. He laughed, the sound warm and rich in the cozy room. "Guilty as charged. Numbers were never my strength." Dahlia closed the ledger, rubbing her tired eyes. "Nor horses mine, but I'm learning." In the weeks since she'd come to the Flying K, Adam had continued teaching her to ride, patient with her initial fear and awkwardness. Now she could comfortably handle Willow at a trot and was beginning to master the canter, though she doubted she'd ever match the easy grace with which Adam sat a horse. A particularly loud crack of thunder made her jump, sending her pen rolling across the desk. Adam retrieved it, his fingers brushing hers as he handed it back. "Thank you," she said, acutely aware of the brief contact. Adam nodded, his eyes lingering on her face a moment longer than necessary. "It's late," he said finally. "You should get some rest." "So should you," she countered, noting the tired lines around his eyes. "You've been up since before dawn." "Ranch doesn't run itself," he said with a shrug. "No," she agreed, "but it doesn't need to run you into the ground either." Adam's expression softened. "I'm not used to someone worrying about me." "Well, get used to it," Dahlia said, then immediately blushed at her own forwardness. "I mean, Essie worries too, you know. We both do." Adam smiled, but there was something in his eyes that made Dahlia's heart beat a little faster. "Good night, Dahlia," he said softly. "Good night, Adam," she replied, watching as he left the study. Alone again, she stared at the closed door for a long moment, acknowledging what she'd been trying to deny for weeks now. She was falling in love with Adam Kincaid. It was impossible, of course. She was still legally married to another man. Adam saw her as someone to protect, to help, nothing more. And even if he did feel something deeper, He was too honorable to act on it while she remained Harold Wilkins' wife. Sighing, Dahlia gathered her papers and headed upstairs to bed, the thunder still rolling across the sky like distant cannons. September brought cooler temperatures and a letter from the territorial court, confirming that Dahlia's petition for divorce would be heard when Judge Wilson arrived in Reading in early October. The news brought both relief and anxiety. Relief that the end of her legal tie to Wilkins was in sight, anxiety about the public nature of the proceedings and what she would have to reveal. Adam, sensing her unease, suggested a ride to take her mind off her worries. They saddled their horses after breakfast, Adam on his bay gelding, Dancer, and Dahlia on Willow, and set out across the rolling grasslands that made up the heart of the flying K. It was a glorious day, the sky an impossible blue, dotted with clouds that cast shifting shadows on the landscape below. Dahlia had grown comfortable enough on horseback to appreciate the beauty around her, no longer focused solely on staying in the saddle. They rode in companionable silence for a while, following a stream that meandered through the property. Eventually, they came to a grove of cottonwoods surrounding a small pond, an oasis of shade in the open prairie. "This is beautiful," Dahlia said as they dismounted, leading their horses to drink from the clear water. "It's my favorite spot on the ranch," Adam admitted, loosening Dancer's girth to make the gelding more comfortable. "I come here to think sometimes." Dahlia smiled, imagining him seeking solitude in this peaceful place. "What do you think about?" Adam shrugged, his eyes on the water. "The future mostly. What I want the ranch to become, what I want for myself." "And what is that?" Dahlia asked softly. "What do you want for yourself?" He was quiet for a long moment, as if weighing his answer carefully. "For a long time it was just this, the ranch, the land. Building something that was mine." He glanced at her. "But lately I've been thinking there should be more." Dahlia's heart quickened. "More?" Adam took a step toward her, close enough that she could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes. Dahlia, the sound of hoofbeats interrupted whatever he had been about to say. They both turned to see a rider approaching at a gallop. Pedro, one of the younger ranch hands. "Mr. Kincaid," the boy called as he drew closer. "Sheriff Tanner sent me to find you, says it's urgent." Adam's face hardened. "What's happened?" Pedro reined in his lathered horse, breathing hard from the hard ride. "It's Wilkins, sir. He's in town, drunk and making threats. Says he's coming for his wife if she won't come to him." Dahlia felt the blood drain from her face. Adam moved instinctively closer to her, as if to shield her from the news. "When?" Adam demanded. "Now, sir," Pedro said, his young face grim. "Sheriff's holding him at the jail for disturbing the peace, but says he can't keep him long without charges. Wanted to warn you." Adam nodded, his mind clearly racing. "Ride back and tell the sheriff we're coming. Then find Tom and tell him what's happening. I want extra men watching the ranch tonight, just in case." Pedro nodded and wheeled his horse around, galloping back toward town. Adam turned to Dahlia, his expression grave. "We need to go to Reading. Better to face this head-on with the sheriff present than wait for Wilkins to show up at the ranch." Dahlia swallowed hard, fear churning in her stomach. "All right," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. They mounted quickly and rode toward town, pushing the horses harder than they normally would. Dahlia's mind raced with the same speed, imagining confronting Wilkins after months of peaceful separation. The bruises he'd left on her body had long since faded, but the memory of his rage remained vivid. Reading came into view, a small but growing town with a main street lined by wooden buildings, some newly painted, others weathered by years of sun and snow. They slowed their horses to a walk as they entered the town proper, drawing curious glances from people on the boardwalks. The sheriff's office was a solid brick building near the center of town. Adam dismounted first, then helped Dahlia down, his hands lingering supportively at her waist for a moment. "Remember," he said quietly, "you've done nothing wrong, and you're not alone." She nodded, drawing strength from his presence beside her. Together they entered the sheriff's office. Sheriff Tanner looked up from his desk, relief evident on his face when he saw them. "Good, you're here. Pedro found you quickly." "Where is he?" Adam asked without preamble. Tanner gestured toward a door leading to the cells in the back. "Locked up for now. Came into the saloon around noon, already half drunk. Started mouthing off about his runaway wife and how he was going to reclaim what's his. When Bart tried to calm him down, Wilkins took a swing at him. Gave me cause to lock him up for a few hours." "Has he sobered up?" Dahlia asked, her voice small but determined. "Enough to be even angrier," Tanner said grimly. "I thought it best you know what's coming. The divorce hearing is still weeks away, and legally he does have rights where you're concerned, Mrs. Hart." "She's not going back to him," Adam said flatly. "Not after what he did." Tanner sighed, rubbing his graying beard. "I agree with you, Kincaid, but the law doesn't always see things our way." "I want to speak with him," Dahlia said suddenly, surprising both men. "Absolutely not," Adam responded immediately. "Dahlia, that's not wise," Tanner added more gently. She lifted her chin, meeting their concerned gazes. "I need to. I've been hiding at the Flying K for months, letting Adam protect me. But this is my fight, my future. I need to face him." Adam's jaw tightened, but after a moment he nodded reluctantly. "Not alone. I'll be with you. We all will," Tanner agreed, standing and taking a ring of keys from a hook on the wall. "But be prepared, he's not the man you married, Mrs. Hart. The months haven't improved him." Dahlia nodded, squaring her shoulders as Tanner led them to the door separating the office from the cells beyond. The sheriff unlocked it and held it open, allowing Dahlia and Adam to enter first. There were 3 cells, only one occupied. Harold Wilkins sat on a narrow cot, his head in his hands. He looked up as they entered, and Dahlia had to suppress a gasp. The man had deteriorated significantly since she'd last seen him. His face was bloated from drink, his clothes filthy and torn. But his eyes were the same, cold and filled with a rage that seemed to have festered during their separation. "Well, well," Wilkins slurred, rising unsteadily to his feet. "The runaway bride returns. Come to apologize, have you?" Dahlia stepped forward, conscious of Adam's protective presence just behind her shoulder. "No, Harold. I came to tell you that I've filed for divorce. The hearing is next month, and I intend to be free of you legally, as I already am in every other way." Wilkins' face contorted with fury. "You think any judge will grant you a divorce? You're my wife. You made vows." "Vows you broke the moment you raised your hand to her," Adam interjected, his voice hard as iron. Wilkins' bloodshot eyes shifted to Adam, narrowing with hatred. "This is between me and my wife, Kincaid. Or is she yours now, is that it? You stole her from me and made her your whore." Adam surged forward, but Tanner's hand on his arm stopped him. Dahlia stepped closer to the cell, just out of Wilkins' reach. "No one stole me," she said clearly. "I fled for my life the night you beat me and then shot at me. Mr. Kincaid gave me shelter when I had nowhere else to go. He has been a friend and nothing more, which is more than you ever were." Wilkins gripped the bars of his cell, his knuckles white. "You belong to me. The law says so, and when I get out of here, I'm coming for what's mine." Something in Dahlia snapped at his words, the last vestiges of fear, perhaps, or the remains of the timid woman who had arrived in Montana months ago. "I belong to no one but myself," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Not anymore. You can threaten all you want, Harold, but you will never touch me again. Ever. I would die first. Wilkins lunged against the bars, spittle flying from his mouth as he hurled obscenities at her. Tanner stepped forward, his hand on his gun. "That's enough," the sheriff said firmly. "Wilkins, you've just added threatening behavior to your charges. I think you'll be staying with us a bit longer." Dahlia turned away from the cell, her back straight, and walked toward the door without looking back. Adam followed, closing the door behind them, muffling Wilkins' continued ranting. In the outer office, Dahlia drew a shaky breath, but her eyes were clear and determined when she looked at Adam and the sheriff. "Thank you both," she said. "I needed to do that." Adam's expression was a mixture of concern and admiration. "You were brave in there." "Foolhardy, maybe," Tanner said, but there was respect in his voice. "But effective. I can hold him for a few days on these charges, but eventually he'll be released." "By then I'll be ready," Dahlia said firmly. "I won't hide anymore." Adam placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch gentle but supportive. "You won't have to, but you also won't face him alone." The ride back to the Flying K was quieter than their journey into town had been. Dahlia was lost in thought, processing the confrontation with Wilkins and the feelings it had stirred in her, not fear, as she had expected, but a deep, burning resolve. As they rode side by side, Adam occasionally glanced at her, his expression concerned. "Are you all right?" he asked finally, breaking the silence. Dahlia nodded, offering him a small smile. "I am. Better than I expected to be, actually. Seeing him like that, it reminded me of how far I've come, how much stronger I am now." "You've always been strong," Adam said quietly. "You just didn't know it yet." His words warmed her, chasing away the last chill that the encounter with Wilkins had left in her heart. "Thank you for believing that, even when I didn't." They rode in companionable silence for a while longer, the horses picking their way along the familiar trail back to the ranch. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold that reflected off the tall grass surrounding them. "Adam," Dahlia said suddenly, drawing her horse to a halt. "Earlier at the pond before Pedro arrived, what were you going to say?" Adam reined in beside her, his expression unreadable in the fading light. For a moment she thought he might not answer. "I was going to say," he began slowly, "that for a long time I thought the ranch was enough, that building something, owning land, was all I needed. But lately I've realized that's not true." Dahlia's heart quickened. "What else do you need?" Adam turned in his saddle to face her fully, his eyes intense. "Someone to share it with. Someone who sees the beauty in this place the way I do. Someone who makes a house feel like a home." "Adam," Dahlia whispered, hardly daring to hope he meant what she thought he meant. "I know the timing is impossible," he continued, his voice low and earnest. "You're still legally married to another man. You're under my protection, which makes anything between us complicated. But I need you to know, Dahlia, that when you're free, truly free, I would like to court you properly if you'd allow it." Joy bloomed in Dahlia's chest, bright and unexpected as a wildflower after rain. "I would like that very much," she said simply. Adam's face relaxed into a smile that transformed his features, making him look younger, less burdened. "Then we'll speak of this again after the divorce is final." Dahlia nodded, knowing it was the right decision, however much her heart might wish otherwise. "After the divorce," she agreed. They rode on toward home, the distance between their horses a little smaller than before. The silence between them filled not with tension but with promise. The weeks leading up to the divorce hearing passed in a curious mixture of tension and contentment for Dahlia. Tension because Wilkins, after being released from jail, had taken to loitering near the general store in Redding, watching with malevolent eyes whenever Dahlia rode into town with Adam or Essie for supplies. Contentment because, despite this shadow, life at the Flying K had never felt more right. The unspoken understanding between her and Adam deepened their friendship while adding an undercurrent of anticipation to their daily interactions. True to his word, he made no romantic overtures, maintaining a respectful distance that nevertheless failed to hide the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her. October arrived with its crisp mornings and golden afternoons, the cottonwoods along the creek turning bright yellow against the still green grass. Judge Wilson was scheduled to arrive in Reading on the 3rd of the month, with Dahlia's hearing set for the following day. The evening before they were to ride into town, Dahlia sat on the porch, wrapped in a shawl against the growing chill. The sun was setting beyond the mountains, casting long shadows across the ranch yard. She heard the door open behind her and knew without looking that it was Adam. "Nervous about tomorrow?" he asked, taking the chair beside her. Dahlia nodded, her hands clutching her shawl a little tighter. "A little. Sheriff Tanner says Judge Wilson is fair but stern, and Wilkins will be there with who knows what kind of lies prepared." "You have the truth on your side," Adam reminded her gently. "And witnesses me, Tanner, Doc Peterson, who treated your injuries that first night." "I know," Dahlia said, trying to draw comfort from his words. "It's just, what if it's not enough? What if the judge decides that a husband's rights outweigh a wife's safety? It happens, Adam, more often than anyone likes to admit." Adam was quiet for a moment, his face solemn in the fading light. "If that happens," he said finally, "we'll find another way. I promised you that night behind the barn that no one would ever hurt you again, and I meant it." Dahlia looked at him, struck by his words. "You never actually said that, you know." "Said what?" "That no one would ever hurt me again," she clarified. "You offered me a choice and protection, but those exact words, I don't recall them." Adam frowned slightly, thinking back to that night. "You're right," he admitted. "But it was what I meant, what I was thinking. And I'm saying it now. No one will ever hurt you again, Dahlia. Not while I have breath in my body." The intensity in his voice sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the evening chill. "Thank you," she whispered, the words inadequate for the emotion behind them. They sat in silence as darkness fell completely, the stars emerging one by one in the vast Montana sky. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for tonight, Dahlia allowed herself to feel safe, protected, and despite everything, hopeful for the future. The territorial courthouse in Reading was a simple but dignified building, its courtroom furnished with polished wooden benches and a raised judge's bench at the front. By 10 o'clock the next morning, it was filled nearly to capacity, not only with those who had business before Judge Wilson, but also with curious townspeople eager to witness the scandalous divorce proceedings of the mail-order bride and her abusive husband. Dahlia sat at a small table on the left side of the courtroom, wearing her best dress, a modest navy blue with white collar and cuffs, and a matching hat that partially shaded her face. Beside her sat Mr. Gregory, a lawyer from Helena who had agreed to represent her after Adam had ridden 3 days to secure his services. The cost had been considerable, but Adam had waved away Dahlia's concerns, insisting her future was worth every penny. Adam himself sat directly behind her, his presence a steady comfort. Sheriff Tanner and Doc Peterson were there as well, ready to testify on her behalf. On the right side of the courtroom, Harold Wilkins slouched in his chair, looking sullen and unwashed. He had no lawyer, having declared to anyone who would listen that he didn't need one. The law was clearly on his side. At precisely 10:30, the bailiff called for all to rise as Judge Wilson entered the courtroom. The judge was a tall, spare man with silver hair and keen eyes that seemed to miss nothing as they swept across the assembled crowd. He took his seat behind the bench and nodded to the bailiff. "First case," the bailiff announced. "Hart versus Wilkins, petition for divorce on grounds of cruelty. Dahlia's heart pounded as the proceedings began. Mr. Gregory presented her case clearly and efficiently, describing how she had come to Reading as a mail-order bride, only to find herself married to a violent drunkard who had beaten her severely after less than a week of marriage. Sheriff Tanner testified about the night he'd been called to the Flying K, describing Dahlia's injuries and Wilkins' threatening behavior when confronted. Doc Peterson followed, his medical testimony detailing the bruises, cuts, and evidence of other abuse he documented when examining Dahlia. Finally, Adam took the stand, his voice steady as he recounted finding Dahlia hiding behind the barn, Wilkins searching for her with a lantern and gun. He described the threats Wilkins had made, his claim that Dahlia was his property, and the state she'd been in when Adam brought her to the Flying K bruised, terrified, and desperate. Throughout these testimonies, Wilkins fidgeted and muttered, his face growing increasingly flushed with anger. When it was finally his turn to speak, he lurched to his feet, pointing an accusatory finger at Dahlia. "She's my wife," he declared, his voice slurring slightly despite the early hour. "Took vows before God and man, till death do us part, those were the words." "Mr. Wilkins," Judge Wilson interrupted sternly, "do you deny the allegations of abuse made against you?" Wilkins waved a dismissive hand. "Woman fell down is all, clumsy, and I might have given her a little discipline when she burned supper, but that's a husband's right." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Judge Wilson silenced it with a sharp rap of his gavel. "And the gunshots, Mr. Wilkins. Do you deny firing at your wife when she fled your home?" "Wasn't aiming at her," Wilkins muttered. "Just trying to scare her, make her come back. She's my property. I paid good money for her passage west." The judge's expression hardened. "Mrs. Hart is a human being, Mr. Wilkins, not a piece of property to be bought and sold." "The law says different," Wilkins insisted stubbornly. "Says a wife belongs to her husband." "The law says no such thing," Judge Wilson corrected him sharply. "The law recognizes marriage as a contract of mutual obligation and respect, a contract which, based on the evidence presented today, you have grievously violated." Hope flickered in Dahlia's chest as she watched the exchange. The judge turned his attention to her, his stern features softening slightly. "Mrs. Hart," he said, "please stand." Dahlia rose, her legs trembling slightly beneath her skirts. Mr. Gregory stood with her, a steadying hand at her elbow. "Mrs. Hart, I have heard the testimony of respected members of this community regarding your ordeal," Judge Wilson said. "But I would like to hear from you directly. Why do you seek this divorce?" Dahlia took a deep breath, conscious of every eye in the courtroom upon her. "Your Honor, I came to Montana seeking a new beginning, a chance at happiness after losing my parents in Boston." Mr. Wilkins' letters painted him as a kind, respectable man in need of a wife. The reality was different. She paused, gathering her courage. "On our wedding night, and every day after until I fled, Harold Wilkins treated me not as a wife but as a possession, something he had purchased and could use or abuse as he saw fit. When I tried to defend myself, he beat me more severely. When I finally ran away, he pursued me with a gun, firing shots that came close enough to raise dust at my feet." Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "I have spent the past months living in fear that the law would force me to return to him, to endure more of the same treatment or worse. I seek this divorce not out of capriciousness or a failure to honor my vows, but out of a desire to live without fear, to have the chance at the life I came west hoping to find." The courtroom was utterly silent as she finished speaking. Judge Wilson studied her face for a long moment, then nodded as if confirming something to himself. "Thank you, Mrs. Hart. You may be seated." Dahlia sat, her heart racing. Adam leaned forward from his seat behind her, his hand briefly touching her shoulder in silent support. Judge Wilson shuffled the papers before him, then looked up, his gaze moving between Dahlia and Wilkins. Having heard the evidence presented by both parties, I am prepared to render my decision, he announced. Marriage is indeed a sacred institution, one not to be dissolved lightly. However, it is also an institution predicated on mutual respect and care between husband and wife. He turned his severe gaze on Wilkins. Mr. Wilkins, the testimony I have heard today paints a clear picture of a man who views marriage not as a partnership, but as ownership, a view that is not only morally reprehensible but contrary to the laws of this territory and this nation. Wilkins started to protest, but the judge silenced him with a raised hand. Furthermore, your actions, the beatings, the gunshots, the threats constitute not merely cruelty but criminal behavior. You're fortunate that Mrs. Hart is seeking only a divorce, rather than pressing criminal charges that could see you imprisoned. The judge turned back to Dahlia, his expression grave but not unkind. Mrs. Hart, this court finds in your favor. Your petition for divorce is granted on grounds of extreme cruelty. You are hereby legally separated from Harold Wilkins, with all bonds of matrimony dissolved. Relief washed over Dahlia in a wave so powerful she felt lightheaded. Behind her, she heard Adam's quiet exhale of tension released. Furthermore, Judge Wilson continued, Mr. Wilkins is hereby ordered to remain at least 500 yards from Mrs. Hart at all times. Any violation of this order will result in his immediate arrest. Is that clear, Mr. Wilkins? Wilkins had gone pale with fury, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. This ain't right, he sputtered. She's my wife. Not anymore, the judge said firmly. And if you continue to harass her, you will find yourself facing charges far more serious than those that landed you in Sheriff Tanner's jail last month. Do I make myself clear? Wilkins glared, but finally muttered, Yes, Your Honor. Very well. Judge Wilson gavelled the proceedings closed. This court is adjourned. The courtroom erupted in murmurs as people rose to leave. Dahlia remained seated, too overwhelmed to move. She was free. Legally, officially free. The nightmare was over. Congratulations, Mrs. Hart, Mr. Gregory said, packing his papers into his briefcase. A clear victory. Thank you, she managed, her voice barely audible over the noise in the courtroom. Adam moved to her side, his face alight with relief and something deeper. It's over, he said simply. Dahlia nodded, tears threatening. It's over. No, it ain't, came Wilkins' slurred voice from behind them. He had pushed his way through the departing crowd, his face contorted with rage. Judge can say what he wants, but you're still mine. Always will be. Adam stepped between them, his body tense. Walk away, Wilkins. Now. Wilkins sneered, his bloodshot eyes moving from Adam to Dahlia. I see how it is. You've been warming his bed all these months, ain't you? That's what this is really about. That's enough, Sheriff Tanner interrupted, appearing at Wilkins' side and gripping his arm firmly. You heard the judge's order. 500 yards. I'm escorting you out of this courthouse right now, and if I see you anywhere near Mrs. Hart again, you'll be spending a long time in my jail. Wilkins yanked his arm free but didn't try to approach closer. His eyes bored into Dahlia with such hatred that she flinched despite herself. This ain't over, he spat, before allowing Tanner to guide him toward the door. Adam watched them go, his face grim before turning back to Dahlia. Don't listen to him. It is over. You're free. Dahlia nodded, trying to shake off the chill that Wilkins' hatred had left. Free, she repeated, testing the word on her tongue. Mr. Gregory excused himself to speak with the judge. leaving Dahlia and Adam alone in the rapidly emptying courtroom. "I'm proud of you," Adam said quietly. "You showed remarkable courage today." Dahlia smiled, the last of her tension beginning to ease. "I had remarkable support." Something shifted in Adam's eyes, a deepening, a warming. "Dahlia," he began, his voice low and serious, "now that you're legally free, I was hoping—" "Adam, Mrs. Hart." Essie's voice interrupted as she hurried toward them, her usually stern face alight with pleasure. "The judge ruled in your favor. You're divorced." Dahlia smiled at the older woman, genuinely glad to see her despite the interruption. "Yes, Essie, it's official." Essie clasped her hands together in satisfaction. "Good. That man was a disgrace. Now I've booked rooms for us at the hotel. I thought we might stay in town tonight, maybe have a celebratory supper at the restaurant. My treat." Adam looked like he might protest, but Dahlia laid a gentle hand on his arm. "That sounds lovely, Essie. Thank you." The moment between them had passed, but Dahlia caught Adam's gaze and held it, trying to convey without words that they would have time to talk later. He seemed to understand, nodding slightly before offering Essie his arm to escort her from the courthouse. Dahlia followed, her steps lighter than they had been in months. Whatever lay ahead, she would face it as a free woman, not Harold Wilkins' abused wife, not Adam Kincaid's charity case, but Dahlia Hart, mistress of her own destiny. The celebratory dinner at Redding's only restaurant was a modest but joyful affair. Sheriff Tanner joined them, as did Doc Peterson and his wife, all raising glasses to Dahlia's newfound freedom. The conversation flowed easily, focusing on pleasant topics: the upcoming Harvest Festival, the doctor's new grandson, Tanner's plans to add a deputy to his office as the town continued to grow. No one mentioned Wilkins or the divorce directly, for which Dahlia was grateful. It felt good to think about ordinary things, to laugh without the shadow of fear hanging over her. Throughout the meal, she was acutely aware of Adam beside her, his presence both reassuring and exciting in a way it hadn't been before. Now, with the legal barriers between them removed, every accidental brush of their hands, every shared glance, carried new possibility. After dinner, the party broke up, with promises to meet for breakfast before the ride back to the ranch in the morning. Essie, pleading tiredness, retired early to her room at the small hotel adjacent to the restaurant. "I think I'll take a short walk before turning in," Dahlia said as they entered the hotel lobby. "The air will do me good after being inside all day." "I'll join you," Adam offered immediately, his eyes searching hers for confirmation that her suggestion had been meant as an invitation. Dahlia smiled, nodding. "I'd like that." The night was clear and cool, the stars impossibly bright above the small town. Most of Redding's businesses had closed for the evening, though light and piano music spilled from the saloon down the street. Adam and Dahlia walked in the opposite direction, toward the small park at the edge of town, their steps falling naturally in rhythm with each other. "How does it feel?" Adam asked after a comfortable silence. Being legally free of him, Dahlia considered the question seriously. "Like a weight has been lifted," she said finally. "I've been carrying it for so long I almost forgot what it felt like not to have it pressing down on me." Adam nodded in understanding. "And what will you do now? With your freedom?" It was the question Dahlia had been asking herself since the judge's ruling. During the months at the Flying K, she'd thought of little beyond obtaining the divorce. Now that it was done, the future stretched before her, full of possibilities. "I'm not entirely sure," she admitted. "I have some money saved from the work I've done for you. I could perhaps find a position as a bookkeeper or a teacher if a school is established here." They had reached the park, a simple square of grass with a few benches and newly planted trees that would someday provide shade. Adam guided her to one of the benches and they sat, the town quiet behind them. "You could do those things," he agreed, his voice careful. "You're certainly capable. But I was hoping. That is, I wondered if you might consider another path." Dahlia turned to face him more fully, her heart beginning to race. "What path would that be?" Adam took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. "Dahlia, when I found you that night, hiding behind Wilkins' barn, I had no idea how much you would come to mean to me. I offered you protection then because it was the right thing to do. But now—" He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "Now I'm offering something else entirely. Not protection, but partnership. Not shelter, but a home one we would build together." Dahlia's breath caught in her throat as she realized what he was saying. "Adam, I love you," he said simply, the words hanging in the night air between them. "I have for some time now. I know it may be too soon after everything you've been through, and if you need time, I'll wait. But I want you to know that the Flying K is yours for as long as you want it, whether as my bookkeeper, my friend, or my wife." Tears filled Dahlia's eyes, not of sadness but of overwhelming joy. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I have since that first night when you offered me a choice no one had given me before." Adam's face softened with relief and happiness. "Then you'll stay, not as my employee or my guest, but as your wife," Dahlia finished for him, the words feeling right in a way she'd never experienced with Wilkins. "Yes, Adam, I'll stay." He drew her closer, his hand gentle on her cheek. "May I kiss you, Dahlia Hart?" he asked, his voice husky with emotion. "Please," she breathed. Adam's lips met hers in a kiss that was both tender and passionate, conveying all the feelings they'd held in check during the months of her marriage to Wilkins. Dahlia responded with equal fervor, her hand coming up to rest against his chest, feeling his heart race beneath her palm. When they finally drew apart, both slightly breathless, Adam rested his forehead against hers. "I meant what I said that night," he murmured. "No one will ever hurt you again, I swear it." Dahlia smiled, joy bubbling up inside her like a spring. "I know," she said simply. "I trust you." They sat together on the bench a while longer, talking of the future, a proper courtship, though abbreviated given their feelings for each other. A wedding in the spring when the wild roses bloomed along the creek at the Flying K. Children, perhaps, in the years to come. As they walked back to the hotel, hand in hand beneath the star-filled sky, Dahlia marveled at the journey that had brought her here. She had come west seeking a new beginning, only to find herself trapped in a nightmare. Yet from that darkness had emerged this unexpected happiness, a love born of respect and kindness, a future filled with promise. The mail-order bride who had hidden behind a barn in terror was gone, replaced by a woman who knew her own strength and worth. And the cowboy who had promised no one would ever hurt her again would keep that promise for the rest of their lives together. The wedding of Adam Kincaid and Dahlia Hart took place the following May, not in the church in Reading but under the open sky at the Flying K. A simple arch of twisted branches, decorated with the season's first wildflowers, marked the spot where they exchanged their vows with Essie, Sheriff Tanner, and all the ranch hands in attendance. Dahlia wore a cream-colored dress that Essie had helped her make, with tiny pearl buttons down the back and lace at the collar and cuffs. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, adorned with a crown of white roses from the bushes that grew along the creek. Adam, standing tall and proud in a new black suit, watched with undisguised love as she walked toward him across the grass, Sheriff Tanner escorting her in place of the father she'd lost years before. The preacher, brought in from Helena for the occasion, spoke of love and partnership, of building a life together on foundations of mutual respect and care. When it came time for the vows, Adam took Dahlia's hands in his eyes never leaving hers. "I, Adam Kincaid, take you, Dahlia Hart, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he said, his voice clear and steady. "I promise to love and cherish you, to protect and support you, to build a home and a life with you for all the days of my life." Dahlia blinked back happy tears as she responded in kind, adding her own promise to the traditional words. "I will stand beside you as your equal partner in all things, offering my strength to yours, my heart to yours, for as long as we both shall live." When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Adam drew her into a kiss that left no doubt of his feelings, prompting cheers and good-natured whistles from the assembled guests. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening, with food, music, and dancing in the yard outside the main house. As twilight fell, bringing with it the first stars of evening, Adam found Dahlia standing alone on the porch, looking out over their ranch now in more ways than one. "Happy?" he asked softly, coming to stand beside her. Dahlia turned to him, her face radiant in the fading light. "More than I ever thought possible," she answered truthfully. "When I came west as a mail-order bride, I was seeking security, a home. I never dared hope for love like this." Adam drew her into his arms, holding her close. "When I rode out that night, looking for strays, I wasn't expecting to find you. Now I can't imagine my life without you." "You won't have to," Dahlia promised, rising on her toes to kiss him once more. "This is just the beginning." And as they stood together on the porch of their home, surrounded by the beauty of the Montana evening, both knew it was true. Their story, like the vast land around them, was only beginning a future stretching ahead, full of promise and possibility, built on the foundations of trust, respect, and a love that had been born in the most unlikely of circumstances, but would endure for all the days of their lives. Years later, on a summer afternoon much like the one when they had first declared their love, Adam and Dahlia Kincaid sat on the porch of the Flying K, watching their children play in the yard. 8-year-old Thomas, named for Adam's father, was attempting to teach his 5-year-old sister Elizabeth how to lasso a fence post, with limited success. Their youngest, 3-year-old Rose, sat nearby, contentedly making a crown of daisies under the watchful eye of Essie, now stooped with age but still the heart of the household. The ranch had prospered under their joint stewardship. Adam's skill with cattle and horses, combined with Dahlia's sharp mind for business, had turned the Flying K into one of the most successful ranches in the territory. The original house had been expanded to accommodate their growing family, and a proper schoolhouse had been built in Redding, where Dahlia taught reading and arithmetic 2 days a week. Harold Wilkins had left Redding shortly after the divorce, driven out partly by the community's disapproval of his treatment of Dahlia and partly by his own demons. Rumors occasionally reached them of his whereabouts, drinking himself to death in mining camps further west, but he never returned to trouble them. "What are you thinking?" Adam asked, noticing Dahlia's contemplative expression as she watched their children. She smiled, leaning against his shoulder. "About how different my life might have been if you hadn't ridden by Wilkins' barn that night, if I hadn't found the courage to run." Adam's arm tightened around her. "I like to think we would have found each other somehow, that some things are meant to be." Dahlia turned to look at him, this man who had saved her in more ways than one, not just from Wilkins' cruelty, but from a life without love, without the joy she now experienced daily. "I believe that too," she said softly. "We were meant to be." As the sun began to set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Their children came running up to the porch, full of stories about their day and questions about supper. Adam lifted little Rose onto his lap, while Thomas and Elizabeth settled at their feet, eager for one of their father's stories about the early days of the ranch. Dahlia watched them all, her heart full. The frightened woman who had hidden behind a barn, certain her life was ending, could never have imagined this future, this family, this love, this profound happiness. Yet here it was, real and precious and enduring. "Tell us about how you and Mama met," Elizabeth requested, her eyes bright with anticipation, though she'd heard the story many times before. Adam smiled at Dahlia over their daughter's head. "Well," he began, his voice dropping to the storytelling tone the children loved. "It was a dark night, and I was out looking for strays when I heard gunshots in the distance." As he retold their story, carefully edited for young ears, Dahlia closed her eyes briefly in gratitude. From terror to triumph, from hiding to happiness, their journey had not been an easy one, but it had led them here to this porch, this family, this love that grew stronger with each passing year. And in the end, that made every step worth taking.